All right, so the Russian president is in India for a visit that the world is watching very closely. So it is Vladimir Putin's first such visit to India after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. And since then, a lot has changed. There are more recent factors that have also triggered a global realignment of ties. So let's break down what is unfolding. Now, Russia's relationship with India is a historic one, which has been alive and well since the Soviet era. But the alliance has come under some fresh scrutiny from the West as Russia's war with Ukraine continues to drag on. And Vladimir Putin's ongoing visit to New Delhi and also India's warm welcome is a time-tested ally in more ways than one, and it goes well beyond bilateral cooperation. It is also a strategic signaling to the West. Now, the American President Donald Trump's tariff tirade against old trading partners has also affected India. Now, these are some pretty testing times for bilateral relations between Washington and New Delhi. And the United States has accused India of supporting Russia amidst an ongoing war with Ukraine by purchasing Russian oil at a discounted rate. Now, for its part, India has reiterated its support for peace, but also ensuring national interest. New Delhi has pointed out Europe's own trade relations with Russia as a major purchaser of Russian energy so far. On Wednesday, the European Union agreed to phase out Russian gas imports by 2027. But nothing, remember, is written in stone, as several member states of the bloc are opposed to this and are preparing to legally challenge this decision. While the United States and the European nations have slammed sanctions on Russia to try and deplete its war chest, Moscow has diversified and also strengthened its relations with other players. Now, Russia and Iran relations have grown significantly in the past few years. For both nations, the mutual goal has been to counter Western influence. Now, Iran has supplied Russia with drones in its war with Ukraine, and Russia, for its part, will be providing Iran with advanced military weapons. Additionally, Russia has a $25 billion deal to help Iran build its nuclear power plants. Vladimir Putin has also shifted his focus to Central Asia, a region which has long served as what experts call a backdoor to trade. In October, the Russian president attended the second Russia-Central Asia summit in Tajikistan. And last week, he was in Kyrgyzstan for a 3-day visit. While these visits are not a first, their timing and agenda is important. And remember, it's not just Ukraine and the Ukrainian war and the US tariffs that have influenced the changing dynamics. Now, Donald Trump, in his earlier remarks, has lashed out at BRICS, a bloc with members such as Russia and India that has kept multilateralism alive. Now, the American tirade against its own trading partners has also pushed India and China closer. A moment of softened diplomacy which was witnessed at the SEO summit as well, between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Vladimir Putin and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, just weeks after the SEO summit, Vladimir Putin is in India after 4 years. His visit raises an important question. Is multilateralism alive and well, and how will the West react to the Russian president's visit? All right, now joining us on the broadcast, we've got Mr. Maximilian Hess, who's a Central Asia Fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, and is joining us all the way from London. Mr. Hess, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. So the Russian President Vladimir Putin is in New Delhi. It is a high-stakes meeting that will unfold over the course of the next 2 days. But I want you to give us the Western perspective on this, because this visit is going to be watched very closely in the European capitals and indeed in Washington. Do you think the American approach to have what has unfolded in the Ukraine war, the trade war that the Donald Trump administration is engaged in, has pushed nations like Russia, India and China to find more common ground than ever before?
Thank you so much for having me. I think that the U.S. approach is certainly shifting, but remember, Washington is continuing to put more sanctions pressure on Russia than at any point so far under the Trump administration, at the same time as these negotiations are ongoing. And a lot of those tightest sanctions, including on its largest oil company, fully come into effect over the coming days. Europe, of course, has a much harsher approach to Russia overall and has even moved to sanction Indian refineries directly for their purchases of Russian oil. Now, India did adapt to the change in the global markets where Russian oil was increasingly not favored in the West and was able to be bought at a significant discount ever. But that's really been the entire basis for growing Indian-Russian trade. There hasn't been a broad expansion of bilateral trade outside those hydrocarbon markets. And as Russia has focused on Putin's own brazen war of aggression against Ukraine, arms deliveries to India have actually decreased. So Russia has less friends, so it has to double down on those few members who are willing to cooperate with it, like the BRICS countries, dictatorships like North Korea, or the Central Asian countries who have little other choice but have been diversifying. For India, however, India still has a wave and a whole menu of options ahead of it. And I would caution against too much dependency on Russia trying to be built up.
India has made its position clear. India has said that its foreign policy is driven by strategic autonomy, and India will do business with any nation that serves its interests. But the American approach of trying to bully and browbeat, nations to try and toe the American line seems to have backfired. Let's in fact cut across to some images that are just coming in from New Delhi. You see the Indian Prime Minister walking alongside with the Russian President, and this is a huge moment. Remember, this is a lot about the optics, which speaks as to how close the equation is between the two leaders. So this is the Indian Prime Minister hosting the Russian President Vladimir Putin. All right, so these are live images that are coming in from the Indian Prime Minister's official residence, where the Russian President Vladimir Putin has been welcomed by the Indian Prime Minister. In fact, the Indian Prime Minister was at the Palam Air Base to receive the Russian President at the airport. So some pretty interesting optics playing out there. And we have with us Mr. Maximilian Hess, who's joining us from London. Mr. Hess, we were talking about, how foreign policy at this moment is in a state of flux. The old linkages, the old understandings perhaps may not work in 2025, and things could very dramatically again change in 2026. Now, there is if you look at how Donald Trump is trying to carry out his diplomacy, he wants the war in Ukraine to end. He also wants Russia to be back in the mainstream in the West again. He wants to expand the G7, include Russia, and to turn that into G8. That would mean that the sanctions on Russia will end immediately afterwards. And Europe, that had been shunning the hydrocarbons from the Russians, would start buying Russian hydrocarbons like they did before 2022. Do you think this is something that the European nations are not looking at? Because the reality of how the world is dealing with Russia will change as soon as the Ukraine war ends, and Donald Trump would have a big hand in that.
I think that would take a most optimistic outcome for each of a number of risk factors. And firstly, Vladimir Putin has shown no intention that he wishes to end the Ukraine war himself. He is playing Donald Trump and the West for time in his negotiations. The Europeans and the United Kingdom themselves will determine their own sanctions strategy. And I do not think there's any likelihood that all of the sanctions on Russia will be lifted anytime soon, or that Russia will once again be trusted as an energy supplier or a trade partner in the West more broadly, even if there is an end to that conflict. Certainly, Donald Trump has made a diplomatic blunder in his dealings with India and the tariff threats, but that does not mean Russia will emerge victorious from all of this.
Russia at this moment will be looking at the developments and it will be quite pleased with what it has managed to accomplish in the Ukraine war. Donald Trump on more than one occasion has said that there is this one big beautiful ocean that separates Europe from the United States of America. and it is not incumbent on the United States to provide the security cover that it had been doing in the aftermath of the Second World War. Do you think the European capitals are making a fundamental mistake of, in many ways, keeping their interests very closely allied with the United States of America at a time when the Americans under Donald Trump do not seem to be reciprocating those interests? How do you see this? For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.